तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो न प्रचोदयात्. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Namaste my dear friends. This is second video on the Gospel of Bhagwan Sri Ramakrishna Parmahamsa. This holy epic is a must for everyone aspiring for liberation and self-realization. This video starts with the fourth visit of Master Mahasaya. In this we call him M. Fourth visit. The next day too was a holiday for M. He arrived at Dakshineshwar at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Sri Ramakrishna was in his room. Narendra, Bhavnath and a few other devotees were sitting on a mat spread on the floor. They were all young men of 19 or 20. Seated on the small couch, Sri Ramakrishna was talking with them and smiling. No sooner had M entered the room than the master laughed aloud and said to the boys, "There, he has come again." They all joined in the laughter. M bowed low before him and took a seat. Before this, he had saluted the master with folded hands, like one with an English education. But that day he learnt to fall down at his feet in orthodox Hindu fashion. The peacock and the opium. Presently, the master explained the cause of his laughter to the devotees. He said, "A man once fed a peacock with a pill of opium at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The next day, exactly at the time the peacock came back, it had felt the intoxication of the drug and returned just in time to have another dose." All laugh. And thought this a very apt illustration. Even at home he had been unable to banish the thought of Sri Ramakrishna for a moment. His mind was constantly at Dakshineshwar and he had counted the minutes until he should go again. In the meantime, the master was having great fun with the boys, treating them as if they were his most intimate friends. Peals of side-splitting laughter filled the room as if it were a mart of joy. The whole thing was a revelation to M. He thought, "Did not I see him only yesterday, intoxicated with God? Was not he swimming then in the ocean of divine love? A sight I had never seen before, and today the same person is behaving like an ordinary man. Was not it he who scolded me on the first day of my coming here? Did not he admonish me, saying, 'And you are a man of knowledge'? Was not it he who said to me that God with form is as true as God without form? Did not he tell me that God alone is real and all else illusory? Was not it he who advised me to live in the world unattached, like a maid servant in a rich man's house? Sri Ramakrishna was having great fun with the young devotees. Now and then he glanced at M. He noticed that M sat in silence. The master said to Ramlal, "You see, he is a little advanced in years and therefore somewhat serious. He sits quiet while the youngsters are making merry." M was then about 28 years old. Hanuman's devotion to Rama. The conversation drifted to Hanuman, whose picture hung on the wall in the master's room. Sri Ramakrishna said, "Just imagine Hanuman's state of mind. He did not care for money, honor, creature comforts, or anything else. He longed only for God. When he was running away with the heavenly weapon that had been secreted in the crystal pillar, Mandodari began to tempt him with various fruits so that he might come down and drop the weapon. But he could not be tricked so easily. In reply to her persuasions, he sang this song. "Am I in need of fruit? I have the fruit that makes this life fruitful indeed. Within my heart the tree of Rama grows, bearing salvation for its fruit. Under the wishful, wish-fulfilling tree of Rama do I sit at ease, plucking whatever fruit I will. But if you speak of fruit, no beggar I for common fruit. Behold, I go, leaving a bitter food for you." As Sri Ramakrishna was singing the song, he went into Samadhi. Again the half-closed eyes and motionless body that one sees in his photograph just a minute before, the devotees had been making merry in his company. Now all eyes were riveted on him. Thus, for the second time, M saw the master in Samadhi. After a long time, the master came back to ordinary consciousness. His face light up, lighted up with a smile, and his body relaxed. His senses began to function in a normal way. He shed tears of joy as he repeated the holy name of Rama, and wondered whether this very saint was the person who a few minutes earlier had been behaving like a child of 5. The master said to Narendra and M, "I should like to hear you speak and argue in English." They both laughed, but they continued to talk in their mother tongue. It was impossible for them to argue any more before the master. Though Ramakrishna insisted they did not talk in English. At 5 o'clock in the afternoon, all the devotees except Narendra and M took leave of the master. As M was walking in the temple garden, he suddenly came upon the master talking to Narendra on the bank of the goose pond. Sri Ramakrishna said to Narendra, "Look here, come a little more often. You are a newcomer. On first acquaintance, people visit each other quite often, as is the case with a lover and his sweetheart." Narendra and M love. "So, please come, won't you?" Narendra, a member of the Brahmosmas, was very particular about his promises. He said with a smile, "Yes, sir, I shall try." As they were returning to the master's room, Sri Ramakrishna said to M, "When peasants go to market to buy bullocks for their plows, they can easily tell the good from the bad by touching their tails. On being touched there, some meekly lie down on the ground. The peasants recognize that these are without mettle and so reject them. They select only those bullocks that fricks about and show spirit when their tails are touched. Narendra is like a bullock of this latter class. He is full of spirit within." The master smiled as he said this and continued, "There are some people who have no grit whatever. They are like flattened rice soaked in milk, soft and mushy, no inner strength." It was dusk. The master was meditating on God. He said to M, "Go and talk to Narendra. Then tell me what you think of him." Evening worship was over in the temples. M met Narendra on the bank of the Ganges and they began to converse. Narendra told M about his studying in college, he being a member of the Brahmansmas and so on. It was now late in the evening and time for M's departure, but he felt reluctant to go and instead went in search of Sri Ramakrishna. He had been fascinated by the master's singing and wanted to hear more. At last he found the master pacing alone in the Nat Mandir in front of the Kali temple. A lamp was burning in the temple on either side of the image of the Divine Mother. The single lamp in the spacious Nat Mandir blended light and darkness into a kind of mystic twilight in which the figure of the Master could be dimly seen. M had been enchanted by the Master's sweet music. With some hesitation, he asked him whether there would be any more singing that evening. "No, not tonight," said Sri Ramakrishna after a little reflection. Then, as if remembering something, he added, "But I am going soon to Balram Bose's house in Calcutta. Come there and you will hear me sing." And agreed to go. "Master, do you know Balram Bose?" M. "No, sir, I don't." "Master, he lives in Bospada." M. "Well, sir, I shall find him." As Sri Ramakrishna walked up and down the hall with M, he said to him, "Let me ask you something. What do you think of me?" M remained silent. Again Sri Ramakrishna asked, "What do you think of me? How many annas of knowledge of God have I?" And "I do not understand what you mean by annas, but of this I am sure. I have never before seen such knowledge, ecstatic love, faith in God, renunciation, and Catholicity anywhere." The master laughed. M bowed low before him and took his leave. He had gone as far as the main gate of the temple garden when he suddenly remembered something and came back to Sri Ramakrishna, who was still in the Nat Mandir. In the dim light, the master all alone was pacing the hall, rejoicing in the self as the lion lives and roams alone in the forest. In silent wonder, M surveyed that great soul. Master to M. What makes you come back? M. Perhaps the house you asked me to go to belongs to a rich man. They may not let me in. I think I had better not go. I would rather meet you here. Master, oh no. Why should you think that? Just mention my name so that you want to see me. Then someone will take you to me. M nodded his assent and, after saluting the master, took his leave. Chapter 2. In the company of devotees, March 11, 1882. Master at Balram's house. About 8 o'clock in the morning, Sri Ramakrishna went as planned to Balram Bose's house in Calcutta. It was the day of the Dola Yatra. Ram, Manmohan, Rakhal, Nitya Gopal, and other devotees were with him. M too came as bidden by the master. Devotees in trance. The devotees and the master sang and danced in a state of divine fervor. Several of them were in an ecstatic mood. Nitya Gopal's chest glowed with the upsurge of emotion, and Rakhal lay on the floor in ecstasy, completely unconscious of the world. The master put his hand on Rakhal's chest and said, "Peace, be quiet." This was Rakhal's first experience of ecstasy. He lived with his father in Calcutta and now and then visited the master at Dakshineswar. About this time he had studied a short while in Vidasagar's school at Shamapukur. When the music was over, the devotees sat down for their meal. Balram stood there humbly, like a servant. Nobody would have taken him for the master of the house. M was still a stranger to the devotees, having met only Narendra at Dakshineshwar. A few days later, M visited the master at Dakshineswar. It was between 4 and 5 o'clock in the afternoon. The master and he were sitting on the steps of the Shiva temple, looking at the temple of Radha Kanta across the courtyard. The master went into an ecstatic mood. Since his nephew Hriday's dismissal from the temple, Sri Ramakrishna had been living without an attendant. On account of his frequent spiritual moods, he could hardly take care of himself. The lack of an attendant caused him great inconvenience. Bigotry condemned. Sri Ramakrishna was talking to Kali, the Divine Mother of the universe. He said, "Mother, everyone says my watch alone is right. The Christians, the Brahmos, the Hindus, the Muslims all say my religion alone is true. But mother, the fact is that nobody's watch is right. Who can truly understand thee? But if a man prays to thee with a yearning heart, he can reach thee through thy grace by any path. Mother, show me sometime how the Christians praise to thee in their churches. But mother, what will people say if I go in? Suppose they make a fuss. Suppose they don't allow me to enter the Kali temple again. Well then, show me the Christian worship from the door of the church." the mind's inability to comprehend God. Another day, the master was seated on the small couch in his room with his usual beaming countenance and arrived with Kali Krishna, who did not know where his friend M was taking him. He had only been told, "If you want to see a grog shop, then come with me. You will see a huge jar of wine there," and related this to Sri Ramakrishna, who laughed about it. The Master said, "The bliss of worship and communion with God is the true wine, the wine of ecstatic love. The goal of human life is to love God. Bhakti is the one essential thing. To know God through jnana and reasoning is extremely difficult." Then the Master sang, "Who is there that can understand what Mother Kali is? Even the six darshanas are powerless to reveal her." The Master said again, "The one goal of life is to cultivate love for God, the love that the milkmaids, the milkman, and the cowherd boys of Vrindavan felt for Krishna. When Krishna went away to Mathura, the cowherds roamed about weeping bitterly because of their separation from him. Saying this, the Master sang with his eyes turned upward, "Just now I saw a youthful cowherd with a young calf in his arms. There he stood, by one hand holding the branch of a young tree. 'Where are you, brother Kanai?' he cried. But Kanai scarcely could he utter. Ka was as much as he could say. He cried, 'Where are you, brother?' And his eyes were filled with tears. When M heard the song of the masters, laden with love, his eyes were moist with tears." April 2, 1882, to Master's visit to Keshav. Sri Ramakrishna was sitting in the drawing room of Keshav Chandra Sen's house in Calcutta. It was 5 o'clock in the afternoon when Keshav was told of his arrival. He came to the drawing room dressed to go out for he was about to call on a sick friend. Now he cancelled his plan. The master said to him, "You have so many things to attend to. Besides, you have to edit a newspaper. You have no time to come to Dakshineswar. So I have come to see you. When I heard of your illness, I vowed green coconut and sugar to the Divine Mother for your recovery. I said to her, 'Mother, if something happens to Keshav, with whom shall I talk in Calcutta?'" The Krishna, Sri Ramakrishna, spoke to Pratap and the other Brahmo devotees. M was seated nearby. Pointing to him, the master said to Keshav, "Will you please ask him why he does not come to Dakshineswar any more? He repeatedly tells me he is not attached to his wife and children." M had been paying visits to the master for about a month. His absence for a time from Dakshineswar called forth this remark. Sri Ramakrishna had asked them to write to him if his coming were delayed. Pandit Samadhai was present. The Brahmo devotees introduced him to Sri Ramakrishna as a scholar well versed in the Vedas and the other scriptures. The master said, "Yes, I can see inside him through his eyes, as one can see the objects in a room through the glass door." Trilokya sang. Suddenly, the master stood up and went into samadhi, repeating the mother's name, coming down a little to the plane of sense consciousness. He danced and sang, "I drink no ordinary wine, but wine of everlasting bliss. As I repeat my mother Kali's name, it is it so intoxicates my mind that people take me to be drunk. First, my Guru gives molasses for the making of the wine. My longing is the ferment to transform it. Knowledge, the maker of the wine, prepares it for me then, and when it is done, my mind imbibes it from the bottle of the mantra. Taking the mother's name to make it pure, drink of this wine, says Ram Prasad, and the four fruits of life are yours. The master looked at Keshav tenderly, as if Keshav were his very own. He seemed to fear that Keshav might belong to someone else, that is to say, that he might become a worldly person. Looking at him, the master sang again, "We are afraid to speak, and yet we are afraid to keep still. Our minds, O Radha, half believe that we are about to lose you. We tell you the secret that we know, the secret whereby we ourselves and others with our help have passed through many a time of peril. Now it all depends on you." Quoting the last part of the song, he said to Keshav, that is to say, renounce everything and call on God. He alone is real, all else is illusory. Without the realization of God, everything is futile. This is the great secret. The master sat down again and began to converse with the devotees. For a while he listened to a piano recital, enjoying it like a child. Then he was taken to the inner apartments where he was served with refreshments and the ladies saluted him. As the master was leaving Keshav's house, the Brahmo devotees accompanied him respectfully to his carriage. Sunday, April 9, 1882, Sri Ramakrishna was seated with his devotees in the drawing room of Ramakrishna Mukherjee's house in Calcutta. It was between 1 and 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Since Colonel Vishwanath lived in that neighborhood, the master intended to visit him before going to see Keshav at the Lily Cottage. A number of neighbors and other friends of Pran Krishna had been invited to meet Sri Ramakrishna. They were all eager to hear his words. God and His glory and dangers of worldly life. Master, God and His glory. This universe is His glory. People see His glory and forget everything. They do not seek God, whose glory is this world. All seek to enjoy women and gold, but there is too much misery and worry in that. This world is like the whirlpool of the Vaisalaxi. Once a boat gets into it, there is no hope of its rescue. Again, the world is like a thorny bush. You have hardly freed yourself from one set of thorns before you find yourself entangled in another. Once you enter a labyrinth, you find it very difficult to get out. Living in the world, a man becomes seared as it were, a devotee. Then what is the way, sir? Prayer and holy company and earnest longing. Master, prayer and the company of holy man. You cannot get rid of an ailment without the help of a physician. But it is not enough to be in the company of religious people only for a day. You should constantly seek it, for the disease has become chronic. Again, you cannot understand the pulse rightly unless you live with a physician. Moving with him constantly, you learn to distinguish between the pulse of phlegm and the pulse of bile. Devotee, what is the good of holy company? Master, it begets yearning for God, it begets love of God. Nothing whatsoever is achieved in spiritual life without yearning. By constant living in the company of holy men, the soul becomes restless for God. This yearning is like the state of mind of a man who has someone ill in the family. His mind is in a state of perpetual restlessness, thinking how the sick person may be cured. Or again, one should feel a yearning for God like the yearning of a man who has lost his job and is wandering from one office to another in search of work. If he is rejected at a certain place which has no vacancy, he goes there again the next day and inquires, is there any vacancy today? There is another way, earnestly praying to God. God is our very own. We should say to him, O God, what is the what is thy nature? Reveal thyself to me. Thou must show thyself to me, for why else hast thou created me? Some Sikh devotees once said to me, God is full of compassion. I said, but why should we call him compassionate? He is our creator. What is there to be wondered at if he is kind to us? Parents bring up their children. Do you call that an act of kindness? They must act that way. Therefore, we should force our demands on God. He is our father and mother. Is not he? If the son demands his patrimony and gives up food and drink in order to enforce his demand, then the parents hand his share over to him 3 years before the legal time. Or when the child demands some pies from his mother and says over and over again, Mother, give me a couple of pies, I beg you on my knees. Then the mother, seeing his earnestness and unable to bear it any more, tosses the money to him. There is another benefit from holy company. It helps one cultivate discrimination between the real and the unreal. God alone is the real, that is to say, the eternal substance, and the world is unreal, that is to say, transitory. As soon as a man finds his mind wandering away to the unreal, he should apply discrimination. The moment an elephant stretches out its trunk to eat a plantain tree, In a neighbor's garden, it gets a blow from the iron god of the driver. Explanation of evil. A neighbor. Why does a man have sinful tendencies, Master? In God's creation, there are all sorts of things. He has created bad man as well as good man. It is He who gives us good tendencies, and it is He again who gives us evil tendencies. Neighbor. In that case, we are not responsible for our sinful actions, are we, Master? Sin begets its own result. This is God's law. Won't you burn our tongue if you chew a chili? In his mouth, in his youth, Mathur led a rather fast life, so he suffered from various diseases before his death. One may not realize this in youth. I have looked into the hearth in the kitchen of the Kali temple when logs are being burnt. At first, the wet would burn rather well. It does not seem then that it contains much moisture. But when the wood is sufficiently burnt, all the moisture runs back to one end, and at last water squirts from the fuel and puts out the fire. So one should be careful about anger, passion, and greed. Take, for instance, the case of Hanuman. In a fit of anger, he burnt Ceylon. At last, he remembered that Sita was living in the Asoka grove. Then he began to tremble lest the fire should injure her. Neighbor, why has God created wicked people? Master, that is His will, His play. In His Maya there exists avidya as well as vidya. Darkness is needed too. It reveals all the more the glory of light. There is no doubt that anger, lust, and greed are evils. Why then has God created them? In order to create saints, a man becomes a saint by conquering the senses. Is there anything impossible for a man who has subdued his passions? He can even realize God through His grace. Again, see how His whole play of creation is perpetuated through lust. Wicked people are needed too. At one time, the tenants of an estate become unruly. The landlord had to send Golak Chaudhry, who was a ruffian. He was such a harsh administrator that the tenants trembled at the very mention of his name. There is need of everything. Once Sita said to her husband, Rama, it would be grand if every house in Ayodhya were a mansion. I find many houses old and dilapidated. But my dear, said Rama, if all the houses were beautiful ones, what would the masons do? Laughter. God has created all kinds of things. He has created good trees and poisonous plants and weeds as well. Among the animals there are good, bad and all kinds of creatures, tigers, lions, snakes and so on. Washing away the heart's impurities with tears. Neighbor, sir, is it ever possible to realize God while leading the life of a householder? Master, certainly. But as I said just now, one must live in holy company and pray unceasingly. One should weep for God when the impurities of the mind are thus washed away. One realizes God. The mind is like A needle covered with mud and God is like a magnet. The needle cannot be united with the magnet unless it is free from mud. Tears wash away the mud, which is nothing but lust, anger, greed, and other evil tendencies, and the inclination to worldly enjoyments as well. As soon as the mud is washed away, the magnet attracts the needle, that is to say, man realizes God. Only the pure in heart see God. A pure patient has an excess of the watery element in his system. What can quinine do for him unless that is removed? Why should not one realize God while living in the world? But, as I said, one must live in holy company, pray to God, weeping for His grace, and now and then go into solitude. Unless the plants on a footpath are protected at first by fences, they are destroyed by cattle. Need of a guru, never. Then householders too will have the vision of God, won't they, Master? Everybody will surely be liberated, but one should follow the instructions of the Guru. If one follows a devious path, one will suffer in trying to retrace one's steps. It takes a long time to achieve liberation. A man may fail to obtain it in this life. Perhaps he will realize God only after many births. Sages like Janaka performed worldly duties. They performed them bearing God in their minds as a dancing girl dances, keeping jars or trays on her head. Have not you seen how the women in northwest India walk, talking and laughing while carrying water pitchers on their heads? Neighbor, carrying water pitchers on their beads. Neighbor, you just refer to the instructions of the Guru. How shall we find him? Master, anyone and everyone cannot be a Guru. A huge timber floats on the water and can carry animals as well, but a piece of worthless wood sinks if a man sits on it and drowns him. Therefore, in every age, God incarnates himself as the Guru to teach humanity. Satchitananda alone is the Guru. What is knowledge and what is the nature of this ego? God alone is the doer and none else. That is knowledge. I am not the doer. I am a mere instrument in his hand. Therefore I say, O Mother, thou art the operator and I am the machine. Thou art the indweller and I am the house. Thou art the driver and I am the carriage. I move as thou movest me. I do as thou makes me do. I speak as thou makes me speak. No, not I, but thou. From Pran Krishna's house, the master went to Colonel Vishwanath's and from there to the Lily Cottage. Chapter 3 Visit to Vidyasagar, August 5, 1882. Pandit Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar was born in the village of Bir Singh, not far from Kamarpukur, Sri Ramakrishna's birthplace. He was known as a great scholar, educator, writer, and philanthropist, one of the creators of modern Bengali. He was also well versed in Sanskrit grammar and poetry. His generosity made his name a household word with his countrymen, most of his income being given in charity to widows, orphans, indigent students, and other needy people. Nor was his compassion limited to human beings. He stopped drinking milk for years so that the cows should not be deprived of it, and he would not drive in a carriage for fear of causing discomfort to the horses. He was a man of indomitable spirit, which he showed when he gave up the lucrative position of principal of the Sanskrit College of Calcutta because of a disagreement with the authorities. His affection for his mother was especially deep. One day, in the absence of a ferry boat, he swam a raging river at the risk of his life to fulfill her wish that he should be present at his brother's wedding. His whole life was one of utter simplicity. The title Vidyasagar, meaning ocean of learning, was given him in recognition of his vast erudition. Master's visit to scholars. Sri Ramakrishna had long wanted to visit Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, learning from him that he was a teacher at Vidyasagar's school. The master asked, "Can you take me to Vidyasagar? I should like very much to see him." M told Ishwar Chandra of Sri Ramakrishna's wish, and the Pandit gladly agreed that M should bring the master some Saturday afternoon at 4 o'clock. He only asked M what kind of Paramahamsa the master was, saying, "Does he wear an ochre cloth?" M answered, "No, sir, he is an unusual person. He wears a red bordered cloth and polished slippers. He lives in a room in Rani Rasmani's temple garden. In his room there is a couch with a mattress and mosquito net. He has no outer indication of holiness, but he doesn't know anything except God. Day and night he thinks of God alone." On the afternoon of August 5, the master left Dakshineswar in a hackney carriage accompanied by Bhavnath, M and Hazra. Vidyasagar lived in Badru Bagan, Badur Bagan in central Calcutta, about 6 miles from Dakshineswar. On the way, Sri Ramakrishna talked with his companions, but as the carriage neared Vidyasagar's house, his mood suddenly changed. He was overpowered with the divine ecstasy. Not noticing this, M pointed out the garden house where Raja Rammohn Roy had lived. The master was annoyed and said, "I don't care about such things now." He was going into an ecstatic state. The carriage stopped in front of Vidyasagar's house. The master alighted, spurred by M, who then led the way. In the courtyard were many flowering plants. As the master walked to the house, he said to M, like a child pointing to his shirt button, "My shirt is unbuttoned. Will that offend Vidyasagar?" "Oh, no," said M. "Don't be anxious about it. Nothing about you will be offensive. Nothing about you will be offensive. You don't have to button your shirt." He accepted the assurance simply, like a child. Vidyasagar was about 62 years old, 16 or 17 years older than the master. He lived in a two-story house built in the English fashion, with lawns on all sides and surrounded by a high wall. After climbing the stairs to the second floor, Sri Ramakrishna and his devotees entered a room at the far end of which Vidyasagar was seated, facing them with a table in front of him. To the right of the table was a bench. Some friends of their host occupied chairs on the other side. Vidyasagar rose to receive the master. Sri Ramakrishna stood in front of the bench with one hand resting on the table. He gazed at Vidyasagar as if they had known each other before and smiled in an ecstatic mood. In that mood he remained standing a few minutes, now and then to bring his mind back to normal consciousness. He said, I shall have a drink of water. In the meantime, the young members of the household and a few friends and relatives of Vidyasagar had gathered around. Sri Ramakrishna, still in an ecstatic mood, sat on the bench. A young man, 17 or 18 years old, who had come to Vidyasagar to seek financial help for his education, was seated there. The master sat down at a little distance from the boy, saying in an abstracted mood, Mother, this boy is very much attached to the world. He belongs to thy realm of ignorance. Vidyasagar told someone to bring water and asked M whether the master would like some sweetmeats also. Since M did not object, Vidyasagar himself went eagerly to the inner apartments and brought the sweets. They were placed before the master. Bhavnath and Hajra also received their share. When they were offered to M, Vidyasagar said, Oh, he is like one of the family. We need not worry about him. Referring to a young devotee, the master said to Vidyasagar, He is a nice young man and is sound at the core. He is like the river Falgu. The surface is covered with sand, but if you dig a little, you will find water flowing underneath. After taking some of the sweets, the master with a smile began to speak to Vidyasagar. Meanwhile, the room had become filled with people. Some were standing and others were seated. Master, oh, today at last I have come to the ocean. Up till now I have seen only canals, marshes or a river at the most, but today I am face to face with the Sagar, the ocean. All laugh. Vidyasagar smiling. Then please take home some salt water. Laughter. Master, oh no, why salt water? You are not the ocean of ignorance, you are the ocean of Vidya, knowledge. You are the ocean of condensed milk. All laugh. Vidyasagar, well, you may put it that way. The Pandit became silent. Sri Ramakrishna said, Your activities are inspired by Sattva. Though they are Rajasic, they are influenced by Sattva. Compassion springs from Sattva. Though work for the good of others belong to Rajas, yet this Rajas has Sattva for its basis and is not harmful. Shuka and other sages cherished compassion in their minds to give people religious instruction to teach them about God. You are distributing food and learning. That is good too. If these activities are done in a selfless spirit, they lead to God. But most people work for fame or to acquire merit. Their activities are not selfless. Besides, you are already a Siddha. Vidyasagar, how is that, sir? Master laughing. When potatoes and other vegetables are well cooked, they become soft and tender, and you possess such a tender nature. You are so compassionate. Laughter. Vidyasagar laughing. But when the paste of kalai pulse is boiled, it becomes all the harder. Uninspired scholarship condemned. Master, but you don't belong to that class. Mere pandits are like diseased fruits that become hard and will not ripen at all. Such fruit has neither the freshness of green fruit nor the flavor of ripe. Vultures soar very high in the sky, but their eyes are fixed on rotten carrion on the ground. The book learned are reputed to be wise, but they are attached to women and gold. Like the vultures, they are in search of carrion. They are attached to the world of ignorance. Compassion, love of God, and renunciation are the glories of true knowledge. Vidyasagar listened to these words in silence. The others too gazed at the master and were attentive to every word he said. Vidyasagar was very reticent about giving religious instruction to others. He had studied Hindu philosophy. Once, when M had asked him his opinion of it, Vidyasagar had said, I think the philosophers have failed to explain what was in their minds. But in his daily life, he followed all the rituals of Hindu religion and wore the sacred thread of a Brahmin. About God, he had once declared, it is indeed impossible to know him. What then should be our duty? It seems to me that we should live in such a way that of others, if others followed our examples, this very earth would be heaven. Everyone should try to do good to the world of duality and transcendental nature of Dharma. Sri Ramakrishna's conversation now turned to the knowledge of Dharma. Master, Dharma is beyond Vidya and Avidya, knowledge and ignorance. It is beyond Maya, the illusion of duality. The world consists of the illusory duality of knowledge and ignorance. It contains knowledge and devotion, and also attachment to woman and gold, righteousness and unrighteousness, good and evil. But Brahma is unattached to these. Good and evil apply to the jiva, the individual soul, as do righteousness and unrighteousness. But Brahma is not at all affected by them. One man may read the Bhagavata by the light of a lamp, and another may commit a forgery by that very light. But the lamp is unaffected. The sun sheds its light on the wicked as well as on the virtuous. You may ask, how then can one explain misery and sin and unhappiness? The answer is that these apply only to the jiva. Brahma is unaffected by them. There is poison in a snake, but though others may die if bitten by it, the snake itself is not affected by the poison. Brahma cannot be expressed in words. What Brahma is cannot be described. All things in the world, the Vedas, the Puranas, the Tantras, the six systems of philosophy have been defiled like food that has been touched by the tongue, for they have been read or uttered by the tongue. Only one thing has not been defiled in this way, and that is Brahma. No one has ever been able to say what Brahma is. Vidyasagar to his friends, oh, that is a remarkable statement. I have learned something new today. Master, a man had two sons. The father sent them to a preceptor to learn the knowledge of Dharma. After a few years, they returned from their preceptor's house and bowed low before their father. Wanting to measure the depth of their knowledge of Dharma, he first questioned the older of the two boys. My child, he said, you have studied all the scriptures. Now tell me what is the nature of Brahma. The boy began to explain Brahma by reciting various texts from the Vedas. The father did not say anything. Then he asked the younger son the same question. But the boy remained silent and stood with eyes cast down. No word escaped his lips. The father was pleased and said to him, "My child, you have understood a little of Brahma. What it is cannot be expressed in words." Parable of Ant and Sugar Hill. Men often think they have understood Brahma fully. Once an ant went to a hill of sugar. One grain filled its stomach. Taking another grain in its mouth, it started homeward. On its way, it thought, "Next time I shall carry home the whole hill." That is the way shallow minds think. They don't know that Brahma is beyond one's words and thought. However great a man may be, how much can he know of Brahma? Sukadeva and sages like him may have been big ants, but even they could carry at the utmost 8 or 10 grains of sugar. As for what has been said in the Vedas and the Puranas, do you know what is what it is like? Suppose a man has seen the ocean and somebody asks him, "Well, what is the ocean like?" The first man opens his mouth as wide as he can and say, "What a sight! What tremendous waves and sounds!" The description of Brahma in the sacred books is like that. It is said in the Vedas that Brahma is of the nature of bliss. It is Satchitananda. Sukha and other sages stood on the shore of this ocean of Brahma and saw and touched the water. According to one school of thought, they never plunged into it. Those who do cannot come back to the world again. Parable of Salt Dole. In Samadhi, one attains the knowledge of Brahma, one realizes Brahma. In that state, reasoning stops altogether and man becomes mute. He has no power to describe the nature of Brahma. Once a salt doll went to measure the depth of the ocean. All laughed. It wanted to tell others how deep the water was, but this it could never do, for no sooner did it get into the water than it melted. Now who was there to report the ocean's depth? A devotee. Suppose a man has obtained the knowledge of Brahma in Samadhi, does not he speak any more? Master, Shankaracharya retained the ego of knowledge in order to teach others. After the vision of Brahma, a man becomes silent. He reasons about it as long as he has not realized it. If you heat butter in a pan on the stove, it makes a sizzling sound as long as the water it contains has not dried up. But when no trace of water is left, the clarified butter makes no sound. If you put an uncooked cake of flour in that butter, it sizzles again. But after the cake is cooked, all sound stops. Just so a man established in Samadhi comes down to the relative plane of consciousness in order to teach others, and then he talks about God. The bee buzzes as long as it is not sitting on a flower. It becomes silent when it begins to sip the honey, but sometimes intoxicated with the honey, it buzzes again. An empty pitcher makes a gurgling sound when it is dipped in water. When it fills up, it becomes silent. All laugh, but if the water is poured from it into another pitcher, then you will hear the sound again, laughter. Rishis of ancient India. The rishis of old attained the knowledge of Dharma. One cannot have this so long as there is the slightest trace of worldliness. How hard the rishis labored. Early in the morning they would go away from the hermitage and would spend the whole day in solitude, meditating on Brahma. At night they would return to the hermitage and eat a little fruit or roots. They kept their minds aloof from the objects of sight, hearing, touch, and other things of a worldly nature. Only thus did they realize Brahma as their own inner consciousness. But in the Kali Yuga, man being totally dependent on the food for life cannot altogether shake off the idea that he is the body. In this state of mind, it is not proper for him to say, I am he. When a man does all sorts of worldly things, he should not say, I am Brahma. Those who cannot give up attachment to worldly things and who finds no means to shake off the feeling of I should rather cherish the idea I am God's servant, I am his devotee. One can also realize God by following the path of devotion. Jnani and Vijnani. The Jnani gives up his identification with the worldly things, discriminating not this, not this. Only then can he realize Brahma. It is like reaching the roof of a house by leaving the steps behind one by one. But the Vijnani who is more intimately acquainted with Brahma realizes something more. He realizes that the steps are made of the same materials as the roof, bricks, lime, and brick dust. That which is realized intuitively as Brahma through the eliminating process of not this, not this, is then found to have become the universe and all its living beings. The Vijnani sees that the reality which is nirguna without attributes is also saguna with attributes. A man cannot live on the roof of a long time. He comes down again. Those who realize Brahma in Samadhi come down also and find that it is Brahma that has become the universe and its living beings. In the musical scale, there are the notes Sa, Re, Ga, Ma, Pa, Dha, and Ni. But one cannot keep one's voice on Ni a long time. The ego does not vanish altogether. The man comes down from Samadhi, perceives that it is Brahma that has become the ego, the universe and all living beings. This is known as Vijnana. I conclude this video here. Next video I will start with Path of Love is Easy. Thank you for watching this video. Namaskar my dear friends. Thank you.